Hello, nerds. How are you doing? Welcome to this bonus episode. This is so weird doing it on my own. This is so weird. Nadia's not here. It's just me. It's just me on this one. I haven't done this for a hot minute. This is the fourth time I've tried to record this intro, right? Because, as always, independent podcast. I've not got a studio. I'm under a duvet right now. That's how we do it. 2 motorbikes have gone past. Then a siren went off on the street. And then the fourth time, this is the fifth time. And then the fourth time, Riley, my dog, got up and did a bit of a shake. So I had to start that again. I should just leave that stuff in, really. It don't matter, does it? I'm a perfectionist. Anyway, welcome to your second bonus episode. Nada and I are on a bit of a hiatus until September when Nature News will be coming back, plus a few exciting things coming your way. Ooh, very exciting. But you've already had one bonus episode, which was Nature Run 101 Live at Global Bird Fair that came out last... when did that come out? Second week? I can't remember the date. But it's out there. It's ready for your ears. Go listen to it. It was so funny. I really enjoyed listening to that back and editing it. And this second episode is with a wonderful human being called Kate Sheridan, aka Conservation Kate on Instagram. If you're not following Kate, make sure you change that immediately and do that. Kate is a wonderful researcher, biologist, and science communicator. What I love about Kate's Instagram, what I've always loved about it, is very raw and honest and shows you the real situations on the ground. And Kate always is kind of a commentator in conservation and is, I was going to say, not afraid to share her view. And she really shouldn't be, because every time I hear Kate talking on her Instagram, I'm kind of nodding along and agreeing. So she's a wonderful person to follow. But on this episode, we talk about Kate's view on conservation, how that's changed over the years and maybe the direction it needs to go in, and also talk about science communication and the risks and impacts that have increased since the rise of social media and kind of, we'll just call it out, maybe some egos in the industry that like to push it a bit too far with some large animals and maybe cause some negative impacts on wildlife and biodiversity from people wanting those same experiences. It was a wonderful chat, as I knew it was going to be. It was embarrassing it's taken me so long to get Kate on the show. But anyway, enough of my mouth and my blabbering along. I'm going to roll on this episode straight away. But before I do, let me just say, don't forget, coffee.com/Into the Wild Pod. If you've got any pounds, pennies, or pences, whatever you want, and you want to throw it towards your favourite wildlife and conservation podcast, then please do so. The link is in the write-up of this episode. And whatever your platform you're listening on, if you're able to, please do leave us a review or give us a share on social media. It really does help out this show. But anyway, grab a cup of tea, sit down, relax, and here is the chat with Kate Sheridan. I was just, do you know what? I was going to say, for people listening, you can't see it, but there's no doubt that Kate's an animal lover based on what I'm looking at. Not just the ornaments behind you, but the artwork you've got on the side. You got the manta ray, you got the rhino.
Yeah, I've got a rhino, I've got a shark, a chimpanzee. There's like a zebra kind of abstract print. These are actually...
What's in the middle top?
This one?
Yeah.
That's a sheep. It's a sheep. That's actually a postcard for my grandparents.
That is adorable that it's made the cut to go between all these animals. It's just a lovely lamb.
One of the students that I worked with in South Africa actually sent these to me, so they're really cute.
I love that. I love that.
But I was obsessed with elephants as a child, and my kind of love for rhinos came out of more working with them and meeting the people who work with them, and the kind of rhino poaching crisis is something that I think kind of epitomizes conservation challenges really nicely, but in a kind of obviously a horrible way. And I love rhinos, and I, if pushed, probably would say they are my favorite animal, but I will always have this nostalgia with elephants because I was obsessed as a child. So this whole collecting elephant ornaments has been going on forever, and I do love them. So it feels like quite full circle that I'm actually going to be, it's my first professional gig with elephants at the end of the year.
Professional gig.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I was going to say to you, a question we get asked as whether you're a naturalist, biologist, conservationist, anything in this kind of in the natural history world, you always get asked that question of like, when did it start for you, or how did that journey go? And you've told us a bit of it there, but I like to twist that question a little bit and say to you, like, how have you ended up doing where you are now? Like, because not from a kind of a time frame perspective, but like you said, you wanted to be a vet, and now you're doing field work. I guess biology. Like, how, like, Was that just coincident moments that happened, or did you purposely start to aim towards this?
I feel like it's been a very kind of gradual evolution
Yeah.
over particularly kind of the first 5 years. So
Mm,
as I mentioned, I studied geography, and that's because the A levels that I did, which for international listeners is the last 2 years of school.
mm,
In the UK, you do 3 or 4 subjects only, so you just pick your favourites and
yeah.
pick what you're good at, and then you go to university if you choose to go to university, or you go off into the big world otherwise. And I, as I mentioned, wasn't very good at chemistry. I also wasn't very good at biology at school. I would say that biology at school and the type of biology I do now are completely different. But I did maths, history, and geography at school.
Okay.
So then I went on to do geography because that was the most environmental science
Mm,
degree relevant that I could do, and did a few biology modules, tried to like build up, but I kind of thought like, oh, I'm really bad at biology. And
mm,
then as I got through the degree and realized that they're all a bit similar, and
yeah,
my
yeah.
dissertation was ecology. It
Mm,
wasn't really, I mean, it was geography, but it was kind of very much like biogeography,
yeah.
ecology focused. And there's so much interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research in these fields. And then I wanted to do this master's, and I tried really hard to get into a master's scheme in conservation biology after my degree, and I was lucky to get into one straight away.
Mm,
And that I learned so much on that course, and that really cemented that I wanted to do research. But I've always also had in the back of my mind that I don't think I want to do research forever. I would like to later in life move into policy, because I do think
mm,
that is somewhere where you can make maybe more of a difference as an individual, or at
mhm.
least you can see the difference in your own lifetime. Because I think with research, a lot of the time, it goes on for so long, it takes
Yeah,
such a slow process, it takes ages, and it's the policymakers that take your research and make things happen. And
yeah, absolutely.
so I would like to do that eventually, but I kind of also think while I'm young, I love being in the field,
Mm,
as I think all animal lovers do. You know, we all got into this because we were the kids who just loved animals when
yeah.
we were little.
Yeah,
And so
literally, yeah.
you want to be with animals. I think while I'm young, I don't have any sort of dependence, or
Yeah.
I can, which is a very privileged position to be in.
Mm,
I I want to be in the field, and so research is a great avenue. And I also think if I do end up in policy, it'll be helpful down the line to actually
mm.
understand how research is conducted in order to translate it into policy. So
That's really smart. That is a smart. And I think that's kind of what you need. You need the people on the ground that are later going, well, I've seen this, and you kind of need it like that. You know, like a Russian doll kind of situation where it's just going up into the policy making. But I like what you said there, Gerd. Like, we all got into this because we like animals, and sometimes that's as deep as it gets, isn't it? That's it. It's
yeah,
like that's
no,
it.
literally.
We love it because we're nature. We're connected to it. Like it's. I struggle to answer that question when people say like, so why are you so far into? Why are you into nature? I'm like, what? How could you? What you don't like bumblebees? I don't get that.
I don't. I honestly don't get it. Like when I speak to people that are like, oh yeah, like I'm not fussed by nature. I don't care about animals, or not that they don't care, but they're just not.
Yeah,
They don't find it absolutely fascinating. I'm like,
no.
what do you mean?
Like
It's
what you
so
don't
cool.
see a flower open and think that was beautiful. Like I don't. Or you see a
Yeah, and just
waterfall and go, I'd happily sit here.
and sort of like I remember learning about the food chain at school and
Mm.
just being like, this is amazing. Like this is
Yeah, yeah.
so clever. And like evolution, I'm like, this is so clever. Like how did this
Yeah, and
like,
it's just a
it's
thing
just
that exists. No one
and it
made
just makes
this.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like it's so
Well,
I just
but
think it's
that's what I
amazing.
believe. I mean, everyone's got their
Yeah.
own belief systems and cultures, of course, but I
That's
believe that
what
it's just a thing that's there.
yeah, and it's amazing. And I think it's really cool that we exist at the same time, because the
Yes,
likelihood
yeah.
of that happening was like so like fathomable
Yeah,
small. And but yeah, I think it does just come down to that childhood curiosity. It just stays with some people, and
yeah,
you
absolutely.
keep going. But the funny thing is the longer you work in conservation, you realise it's not about animals at all, it's about people.
Oh,
And
preach. Absolutely preach to that. Just the.
it's all about. And one of my lecturers in conservation biology said this to our class once, and she completely shattered my universe and like slowly rebuilt it. She said, conservation is just changing human behaviour.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, you're so right.
Yeah.
That's all it is. All
Mhm.
of the biggest challenges just fundamentally come down to changing human behavior. So while it's really important to understand ecosystems, individual species, their dynamics, actually a lot of the biggest challenges are completely to do with people.
Yeah.
And the solutions are completely to do
Yeah, I
with
was just saying
people as
some of the
well.
most beautiful parts of it are to do with people as well.
Yeah,
It literally
definitely.
covers the whole end of the spectrum. Like we say this when we do our Nature Room 101 episodes, we get our audience or our panel to put in stuff to do with nature they don't like, because there's always something. And quite often we get from the audience going, humans, put humans in. And we're like, no, because they're beautiful, they're wonderful, they're incredible, they're unique. People are annoying, but humans are wonderful as a species, and they're incredible. So yeah, it's very much, again, when you get asked that question, going, what's one tip of working in conservation? It's like, well, be a people person. Be someone that can communicate, discuss, and work with people, because you're going to need that. It's not a solo. Like you said, you're going to go and work with elephants, but it's not just going to be Kate out there with a herd on your own. Very much not doing that.
And every conservation challenge or solution has multiple stakeholder groups, and the animals are one of them.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
ecosystem is like one, and then there's about 20 different groups of people. But something I know on this podcast you guys talk about a lot and are big proponents of, and I'm exactly the same, is the value of local indigenous knowledge. And like you diversifying the people that you're speaking to and the people that you're working with as much as possible in conservation. And that's really, I think, the key as well. And so it is actually just all about people, and you spend your whole life just talking to different people. And you're like, can I just go lift up a rock now, please? Like,
okay. And we said before we recorded today, it's okay to be wrong as well. And I think that's another thing in conservation, is you will have to accept at one point, even if you are right, you can also be wrong at the same time. And that's because if you're putting policies or research into practice or anything like that, a community, if they don't want it to happen, you are wrong in that moment. So you have to then work with that community, and it's just something you have to sit at peace with, really. I think it's a big thing,
definitely.
a big part of it.
I think that's a really interesting where the social media and the science the intersection of those two things just crashes every time.
Yeah, I agree.
I started doing social media content just for myself as like an outlet, because I love talking about wildlife and conservation, and I was just talking to my friends all the time about it, and I was like, I need an outlet for myself. And I never expected it to kind of grow and grow, but it did. And but I first and foremost see myself as a researcher, and like I make content about the research, but if I wasn't a researcher, there would be nothing to make content about. But people hate being wrong on social media, whereas in science it's like there was a wonderful article, I think, in The Guardian during COVID of a leading medical researcher, I think, who wrote it, and he explained the role of doubt in science. And he was speaking about the pandemic, but it's so applicable across all disciplines, and how science is just a history of getting stuff wrong and then realizing we were wrong and getting a new theory in place and being like, oh yeah, we're just disproving what we thought we knew, and replacing it with the best interpretation that we have at present, and then getting more information and being like, oh no, there's more now. And so I think scientists are not always, but more kind of willing to accept when they're wrong, because that's just part of the scientific process. And then when that meets the social media world, they collide, and the people on social media don't like to be wrong.
No, of course. And I know it's not a comfortable thing, but like you said, it's, science is that evolution of, like you said, disproving stuff in order to grow and to learn, because, we learn more, and therefore what we thought 10 years ago is now not true. So it's just, there's probably information I put out on this podcast 5 years ago that might now be disproven as not true. So
yeah, and back in the day when people genuinely thought the Earth was the center of the universe, they weren't stupid.
No, it's just what they thought.
It was a working theory, and they weren't idiots. We look at it now and think like, oh, that's so egocentric, but they had reason to believe that was true. They were looking out and seeing stuff, so they were like, oh, that makes sense, And then science developed, and we figured out what was actually going on, and we've discovered so much more since then. But it's not like those people were stupid. They were working with what they had. And I think that's what people like to forget, is that when something is disproven, or we get more information or better information, it doesn't mean that the people before were wrong.
No,
it was the best interpretation of the data at the time, which is what science is all about.
over the weekend when I was, surrounded by these wonderful conservationists and wonderful human beings, with the conversation of conservation inevitably obviously comes up because that's why we're all there. But what's interesting is hearing people's different kind of definition of it, because it does change depending on where you're working, who you're working with, and what species or anything. But for you as a whole, if you can, and this is a big question, Kate, so sorry to drop this bombshell on you, but what does conservation mean to you as a word or as a theory, as a practice? What does it mean?
It is a big question.
It is, isn't it? Sorry.
I do think it kind of fundamentally comes down to conserving. I mean, I guess I can't use the word conserving because that's the same word, but protecting and sustaining biodiversity and ecosystems for future generations. I do think the sustainability side is key in conservation. Sustainability basically meaning sustaining for the future generations. I think that's a key part of conservation. So I think at its core, it is about protecting and sustaining ecosystems, biodiversity for the future. Obviously, it's a lot bigger than that, because how we define what an ecosystem is could be up for discussion, and where we place humanity and society within those webs is also, I think, a big topic of conversation. Are we a part of nature, or are we apart from nature? And where we place ourselves, therefore, does conservation, how much does that bleed into society? And I personally believe that there's a huge intersection between conserving diverse ecosystems and humanity and how we operate. I don't think we saw it in probably like the 1900s. What's referred to often as fortress conservation, which at its most simplest term was all the national parks put big fence around them, and they were like, right, nature there, people here, and it didn't work. And it's been sort of
still being done some places, but it's not working.
It had some benefits, and it was probably in some ways good for some wildlife, but it was obviously done in extremely problematic and racist ways, to be blunt, and definitely wasn't. It was not good for all people, and it wasn't good for all animals either, or all kind of non-human creatures, but I think there's a huge intersection with modern conservation between it being of how much involved kind of humans are and society is. And for me personally, I think it's about the worse the biodiversity and climate crises get, the more conservation actually becomes about sustaining the survival of our own species. Which is so sad, because it makes me sad that the motivation to protect the natural world comes from a desire to fundamentally protect our world. And I know I've contradicted myself slightly by separating us there when I just said I think that we are a part of the natural world, but there are distinctions. I think.
I think it's a systemic part of our disconnect, isn't it? It's not that our species are; it's how we're living is the disconnect there, really. Yeah,
and I do think that the climate crisis in particular, and the biodiversity climate crisis, which is kind of fuels the climate crisis, is an existential threat to humanity. And so I do think that conservation more and more is actually becoming about, well, how are we going to survive? And all the evidence suggests that we can't survive if we don't have biodiverse functioning ecosystems. And so we need both, but protecting those ecosystems and sustaining them ultimately protects and sustains us as well. So that's a bit of a bleak response, but I feel like that is where I'm at with conservation.
No, mate, and like I said, it was a bombshell question, and there is no one answer to it. It's, well, where do you want me to start with it? But I think you summed it up kind of nice. Like, kind of, it is a term that's evolved, and from the 1900s. It is something that's massively changed. Not everywhere. Some people and some mindsets are still very much in those kind of practices or that kind of definition, but it's certainly something that, like science, is constantly evolving. And I think since we've started on the podcast in the last 5 years, even the things we're talking about is lots of, I mean, I'm hearing the word community-led so much more now, almost to a concern. Don't just use it as a buzzword or buzz phrase kind of thing sometimes, but I'm hearing it a lot more, which I think can do more good than bad. At least it is being discussed, because I don't think people can. It's harder to. It sounds bad. Harder to get away with not being that kind of conservation now, because I think there is a lot more awareness on how that needs to be
because of our history in the West of how we thought conservation should work. But that leads me nicely onto my next point, which I was on a panel over the weekend at Global Bird Fair talking about kind of local versus global in terms of conservation focus and money. And it was a really interesting debate, and no side was wrong, no side was right. It was just, kind of, we were supporting our sides. I was on the local side, which I was very proud to be. For you, what side would you sit on, or would you sit in the middle, or where's the pros and cons in that kind of debate for you?
Oh, it's such an interesting debate.
It was, yeah.
I think that I have to sort of, I definitely feel like I probably would sit in the middle
Yeah.
because I see arguments for both sides. I think that my kind of gut instinct, I'm like automatically drawn to the local side because I do think, as we kind of mentioned, the power of community-led movements, local Indigenous knowledge, utilising those and prioritising those and having the people who understand these systems and these processes better than anyone else leading these movements is so important. And so I do think that local conservation is really, really important. But I also think that global movements are essential, given the fact that we are facing global crises, and particularly when it comes to funding. So I think we definitely need both. When I was working on coral restoration, I was managing a restoration and research project in the Maldives, and we worked on 4 islands across the Maldives, of which there's 1,200.
Oh, that's insane.
And we were building using artificial reefs, and we were doing kind of a mixture of different types of restoration, kind of asexual propagation and sexual like settling on the reef. So a mix of things. And what we were studying was how corals reproduce. So we were kind of hoping to advance knowledge in that area in the country. But we were doing basically small scale ecosystem restoration on these islands, but we built entire ecosystems. And I was quite fortunate the timings that I was there when I joined the project on my specific island was very new. It was only a year and a bit old. And then I was there until it was 4 years old. And it grew so much in that time, and it's crazy. And we would do biodiversity assessments and track the progress, and it was bringing so much diversity back to the island. And it was amazing. We'd go and swim there, and we'd built an entire ecosystem that was completely self-sustaining.
Wow.
And it was the corals. All we did was plant corals, but when you plant corals, all the fish come. And then all the sharks come, and turtles come, and rays come, and then all the macro animals come, plants, like all sorts. And it was a full ecosystem. And then we had the coral bleaching incident. And also we had there was a global coral bleaching event in 2024, 2023 to 2025, which basically means it was because we had an El Nino year. So the water was too warm, and corals essentially get stressed, and that's why they bleach. Corals have an algae living in their outer tissue, which they were expelling, but they need the algae in order to uptake nutrients. The reason it gets called bleaching is without the algae, the corals appear completely white. So I'm kind of rushing this explanation, but basically it's a stress response to rising temperatures, which can be fatal to the corals, because while they're bleached, they're not dead. But if they don't recover and get the algae back within a certain time frame, they die. And we saw mass mortality across not just the Maldives. This was global. This was across every reef in the world. Huge mortality. And this was the 4th global bleaching event. This first one was in 1998. So in 1998 to 2024, we've had 4. Huge
That's mad.
Loss of coral. And it was so sad because, I mean, it really affected me as a conservationist because we knew it was going to happen. We've had that data for a long time. We knew we were having an El Nino year, and everything said we're going to have this global bleaching event. We knew about it for ages, and nothing was done to stop it. And that really impacted me because I was like, I've always had that sort of maybe slightly naive, but I think you need to be naive sometimes, view that knowledge is powerful. And then I was sort of hit in the face with it because I was like, oh, we knew about this. And it didn't matter anyway. The fact that we could have stopped it and didn't was really upsetting. But it was also then this huge work that we'd done on a local scale was completely destroyed by things happening on a global scale. So I think we need both, because that local restoration was really impactful. It helped it would have been beneficial, and it would have had further reaching impacts. Those corals were reproducing, so they would have settled elsewhere. Those fish populations would move around. They'd also reproduce, all of these things. But because of the global climate crisis, it ultimately was just, we were nothing in comparison to that. So I think we need both. And I think when it comes to funding, it's important that there is funding at the local level, and it's sort of ethically divided. But if we don't start to see kind of widespread systematic changes from the biggest and most powerful entities in our society, so the global governments and the top 100 richest companies, what happens at a local level, I think, won't stand a chance.
I want to chat about science and conservation communication. As you said, you do this a lot on your social media, and you do it wonderfully, and putting that research out there into the world. There's been a number of docu-films, is that even a thing, over the years? I guess that, especially with dangerous animals, I'd say predators and stuff like that, that get created and get put out there, and they make claims such as it's educating public, that it's conducting research, or it's even benefiting conservation, these kind of films. Do you think those claims are true, Kate?
Well, it really depends on the film, but no, I.
Next question.
I think that documentary filmmaking, like artistic styles of communication within conservation, are really important.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I think this is something that gets misconstrued a lot when anyone criticizes anyone who might be involved in these types of projects. They say that it's the ivory tower. It's the scientists coming from their ivory tower and saying, "Oh, what we do is better than what you do," and that's a massive simplification of a really complicated issue. But it's also not at all how scientists feel. Scientists don't like communication most of the time, and they're really bad at it. They like to give that job to someone else who's very good at it, who is typically an artist, a storyteller. That I think the younger generation are better at both, because we grew up with the world of social media, so we're better at using kind of science, more mainstream media and science communication. But I think of people like David Attenborough as some of the most influential conservationists of all of our lifetimes.
Yeah.
He has, but he's not a scientist, and I absolutely do not think that you need to be a scientist to be in conservation. There's so many arms of conservation, and research is just one of them.
Yeah, totally.
But that doesn't mean that everyone who has a camera and interacts with an animal is a conservationist. And it's very important that we're being transparent about what we're doing. And what we see a lot with mainstream media and social media is anyone can post anything they want on social media, which is not always a good thing. We kind of see people claiming to be scientists when actually they're photographers. And as I said, there's a place for photographers in conservation, a huge, huge place. They play an really important role. And I'm not saying they play less of a role than scientists, but it's a different role. And what we see with people kind of claiming to be scientists is that they are doing that to gain credibility and then misleading the public by presenting their opinion as fact. And because they've said that they're a scientist, it makes it seem like their opinion probably is fact when it's not. And I don't think it's beneficial to the conservation movement. I think it's actually harmful, because A, it creates division between groups, and B, it mixes up the message. And so when actual scientists come forward, they're not believed.
Yeah.
Because people have already made their mind up based on false claims. And it's something, I agree, it happens particularly with predators, particularly in the marine side, but we do see it a little bit with terrestrial predators as well. I mean, in America, there's quite a bit of people who think, they have, I think there's weird people with bears who like to interact with bears. And
there are weird people with bears.
Yeah.
I'm happy for that as a sentence.
And Tiger King expose, there were a lot of very questionable people working with predators in sort of quote unquote sanctuaries. I think the Tiger King documentary really shone a light on that and has made people very skeptical of those types of people. And I think some documentaries that we've seen since, people had that expectation of it being more of an expose and it being the complete opposite.
I guess, do you think it's something that's kind of been exacerbated slightly since the kind of, I was going to say popularity of social media, but that makes me sound like 75 years old. But I mean, like, since social media is so much more accessible now, or has become a part of literally every industry and part of our lives. Do you think this kind of, I don't know what to call it. I really struggle with the words to try and label this kind of stuff. But if someone's just gonna, let's say they're jumping in and getting close to whale sharks and just posting that on social media and making claims or whatever, do you think that kind of stuff has got worse since Instagram, TikTok, and things like that have just blown up with people's content consumerism kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I really think social media has played a huge role in the rise of unethical wildlife tourism. And I think it's because people feel very entitled to content. They feel like they have to get, like, they've flown all this way, they've paid this money, therefore they deserve the money shot. And people like to be in those shots. They like to be they like to be a picture of them with an animal.
You're right.
And I think there are a lot of people to blame for this. I think, and I can be guilty of this sometimes, something I've been trying really hard to remember to do on any post I post of that's just kind of like a wildlife photography picture of an animal, is to say what lens I was using. And I actually got this from my cousin. She's a marine biologist who works with cetaceans, and she was saying that this is something that they've been trying to encourage more and more when people post photos of cetaceans like whales and dolphins from boats using a 800mm lens, but it looks like they are right next to those animals. And therefore people book tourist holidays and they want their boat to get right next to the animal because that's the expectation that they have, is to see them. So I think that's something that I try to remember to do, but I'm not very good at remembering. But I think it's great when people do, is when it's professional photography, to say what lens you were using and what permits you were operating under.
Yes,
if you are a professional photographer.
Or also post your iPhone photo as well, please.
Yeah, exactly. I really enjoy those reels where people say like what my iPhone saw versus my like $700 camera, because it's like that's really managing people's expectations. Totally, that like this is the view you're actually gonna have. This is the content I got because I've invested this much money in my kit. So I think stuff like that, I think, is really important. I also think that people have just become so entitled when it comes to animals. And there was a really interesting, I think it's in Thailand. I don't know much about this. This is going to be a really bad story, but there's a place where lots of sharks kind of aggregate, and it's sort of like, in parts of like Vietnam where you've got the Halong Bay. It's the sea, but it kind of looks like a lake. And there's a place like that, and there was I don't know where it was. I think it's in Thailand. A lot of sharks go there, and they actually banned people from swimming there because it was getting so polluted. And then there was really mixed reactions about this because it was a really popular tourist site, but they basically were saying, well, all the sharks have gone because it's too crowded and there was too much trash. And so they stopped people going there, and then the sharks started coming back, and it kind of came back. And then it became this debate of, okay, do we reopen it, try and reopen it with stricter regulations, but not super confident that's going to work? Or do we keep it closed and people just have to suck it up that they can't go there anymore? And I thought it was such an interesting point, because I was like, I would love to go there.
Yeah.
But if me going there means that I ruin it and the sharks can't go there anymore, then obviously I don't want to go there. And I was like, that's really interesting that people have just become so entitled to think, well, I deserve to go there. I deserve to see it. And I think people have this a lot with animals. They're like, I deserve to be really close to this animal. I deserve to have that photo. I want to, therefore I should. And they put themselves first in those situations. I think social media has a really, really big part of that.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think it teeters into sort of dangerous territory with predators. And this is something that, with sharks, it happens more, I think, or with marine predators. We're seeing it with orcas as well. I'm really, really scared about the number of the fact that now normal people can go swim with orcas, I feel like that's quite a recent thing.
That's also, I'm sorry, that's Darwinism, surely.
Yeah.
Surely?
It really, really worries me because
Terrifies me. I'm not even doing it.
didn't used to be a thing. I remember I feel like not even maybe 10 years ago, the only people that were getting in the water with orcas were the Nat Geo teams and the researchers. There weren't tour. I don't remember this being a thing that there were tour that just a random person can book on and go if you can pay for it.
Well, you could just jump in with something literally called a killer whale.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that they've never kind of attacked anyone in the wild, and I know that they are probably a bit too intelligent to bother, but I am worried about it and I don't like it and I don't understand why people feel like they need to go swim with an orca. Just look at it from a boat. Like I mean, I'm sure it's incredible. I'm sure it's incredible. And, you know, maybe cut to 10 years and there's a video on my Instagram. I mean, if I was invited by a researcher, would I?
No, but you know what, Kate? I wouldn't. I
don't know if I would either.
I think this is all right. You're going to hate me as you being a researcher. You're going to hate me when I say this.
That's fine.
We know enough about orca that no one needs to get in the water now. We know the reasons they're dying. We know reasons are at risk. There's always more to learn. And I'm not saying no one should, but we shouldn't be working out ways to do it.
I don't even know if there are researchers getting in the water, to be honest, because if we wanted to monitor their behaviour in the water, you just stick a camera in the water.
Yeah.
That would be much more, they'd get hours and hours of footage then that's non-invasive, so less likely to be responding to the fact that there's a human in the water.
Yeah.
So more accurate. Yeah. A lot of research, because orcas, you can identify them from their dorsal fins. A lot of research is non-invasive.
Yeah, that's true. You don't even have to get in.
So I'm not even sure if there are researchers. I'm sure there have been at times.
Oh,
but,
I'd love to hear an excuse for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are things that they've captured, but yeah, I mean, we were researching them for decades without getting in the water.
A lot of it's aerial as well, isn't it? When you're looking at pods close to the surface, a lot of it's aerial or looking at certainly behaviour research. Yeah,
definitely. And there's probably also, are they called like ROVs, the underwater cameras that you can leave for ages and put them but people, you know, they like to stick. I know my cousin does this with her work with the acoustic recorders. They just put it on a big stick and then hang it off the boat.
Done.
And they collect loads of data.
Yeah.
Done. So I'm not sure of how many researchers are swimming with orcas, but I'm very concerned about the rise of orca swimming as a tourist opportunity because someone is going to die. I really do think.
It's not an if, is it?
Exactly. It will happen, and it will be not the fault of the orca. And then it will be really upsetting because the kind of the SeaWorld, the Blackfish documentary, another good example of a documentary that led to legislative change that was really impactful, really powerful. And a really key argument for that was that there's no record of an orca attacking or killing a human being in the wild. The aggression that we see from captive orcas is a result of captivity.
Yeah.
It's not that I think that someone will die in the wild and then we'll start putting orcas back in activity. I don't necessarily think that, but it will be really discredit that movement, which will be really annoying. Because essentially, if you are leading this level of wildlife interaction, you are domesticating those animals. You are kind of, or conditioning them a bit, which is akin to captivity. Yes, they can swim away, but they could also attack you. Those are their two options.
And you're pushing boundaries, essentially. You're pushing dangerous boundaries. Yeah.
And we see this with sharks, and I think people, it's such a controversial topic, but it really shouldn't be. We see it with sharks a lot, baited shark diving. They are attracting sharks to specific areas and keeping them there because they are fed consistently. And there are some studies that with tiger sharks and bull sharks, I think, that have suggested that the baiting in certain parts of the world hasn't influenced their migratory patterns, and not all sharks are super migratory, and there's massive differences between species and within species. Some individuals like to go on big migrations, some don't. So you know, there is some evidence to suggest that the baiting doesn't necessarily interfere with their movements, but I think a lot of that is ongoing, but that is very interesting and definitely worth noting. But with some of these shark sites, they are so conditioned to people. It is almost akin to captivity. Yes, they can leave, but they are so used to people. They're interacting with people every single day. They're being fed. They're conditioned to have expectations, which is how you train a captive animal. And it's not the same. I'm not saying it is the
Mm.
same, but there's a bit of crossover there, and I think when people if and when there are fatalities or serious incidences involving people, we have to look at, well, how far did we push them
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah.
Which is what we did with SeaWorld. We
Mm.
looked at it and said, yeah, we pushed it too far.
Yeah.
We stressed them out too much, and we think that there's actually no way of doing this without pushing them too far, and therefore we need to stop doing it. And I worry that we might get there with wild animals, because even though they're not in captivity, we are conditioning their behavior and we are training them somewhat to expect a certain type of interaction, which is typically based around food. And I don't know why people think it's so acceptable with sharks when we wouldn't think it was acceptable with other animals. I really don't. I think it's a sort of, we have a weird attitude towards the sea that we don't really have on land. And it's not to say that we're more disrespectful towards marine ecosystems, because we're pretty disrespectful across the board. But
Yeah.
I think there is that bit of, oh, out of sight, out of mind attitude towards
I
the ocean.
agree.
And
Yeah, I do agree.
a quote I come back to, and I've no idea where this came from. I don't know who said it first, but a healthy ocean and an unhealthy ocean look exactly the same from the surface. And I think we really have internalized that too much. So I don't know if that's it, but it's really counterintuitive, because we are so defenseless in the ocean. Like, we're really bad swimmers compared to everything that lives in the ocean, obviously. So I don't know why we have this slightly more like hero concept that we think that we'll be fine. Because at least we are evolved to move on land and to run and walk. Yeah, we're not as evolved as a cheetah or I mean, most, apex predators in terrestrial ecosystems, but you would think we'd have a better chance of getting away physically from a bear or a lion than we would from a shark. I mean, we've got no chance. If it wants to kill us,
Yeah,
it's gonna
I can
kill us.
definitely run faster than I can swim.
But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
For sure.
climb better than I can dive.
And you'd have just better orientation on land as well. You would
Yeah, and
you would
instincts,
be able to
everything.
turn quicker. You could climb if that was something that's gonna help you. You could move. You can go backwards. You can go forward. Like swimming, you'd get so lost immediately. You would have, and with land, you'd be like, right, okay, that tree is there, so that means I know which way I'm going. Like, I've been here before. Underwater, we wouldn't have a clue, unless it's somewhere you know really, really well.
I think there's something human in you as well, that you know when you're pushing, and not that I do or you do, but you would know if you're pushing a boundary of a terrestrial animal more so. I think there's something innate in you go that this isn't normal. But in the ocean, we don't know those behaviors as instinctively but because we're not a marine creature. So do you know what I mean? It's like a lot of people wouldn't know if they were being stalked by a marine animal, whereas when you're in the woods somewhere, you can sometimes feel those eyes on you. And I think there's something very human in that we get. I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit blasé with it, but
I think that's true. I think one of the big things that we lose underwater is our hearing, which is one of our key senses. Like, obviously you can hear bits, but with an elephant, for example, when an elephant is telling you you're too close or you need to back off or whatever, and it's going to mock charge, or it's going to just give you a warning. It's a visual warning and it's an audio warning. We can really utilize more of our senses, whereas we completely lose that underwater. We can see, but we can't see anywhere near as well as we can see online. We don't have our full range of vision. We can't see as far. We don't have as much light. Like, our eyes aren't evolved to deal with the light. And if you're diving, the colors start to change the deeper you go. Like, our vision's nowhere near as good. So we're operating at not, like, vision being our kind of primary sense, not full capacity. We can't hear. We can't, and then we don't have all these other amazing senses that all these other underwater animals. I mean, sharks have 8 senses, we have 5. So they have much more ability to understand what's going on and to detect like changes in what we're doing than we do in what they're doing. And there are, there has been work in this field, and a lot of the people who decide that they think it's really important that they do go swim with large dangerous sharks all the time for whatever reason have, and this is something I will give them credit for. They are very good at spotting micro changes in behavior that are turning aggressive, which means, okay, they need to get back on the boat. I don't know why we need to know that, because we only need to know that if people are getting in the water with large sharks. I don't know what that does to advance the conservation of sharks. It does great things to keep these people alive, which is all well and good, but I don't really understand the benefit of that knowledge beyond helping the people who are getting in the water with sharks. Whereas I would say that it is beneficial to understand changes in elephant lion behavior because people live alongside them.
Yes. That's true. Sorry, I just really agreed with you very heavily there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right. And that's where the same research can literally have different powers, which goes back to what we're talking about conservation. This is how it changes depending on where you are, what you're working with. But I think you're right. Like if you tell me like sharks have 8 senses, I have 5, and that, we've just learned that when a shark does X behavior, that means it's not happy, it's going to get you to get out of the water. Ryan, there's your information. I would have been like, I didn't even need to know that because I ain't getting in. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You lost me at 8 senses, mate. Like, you lost me.
Exactly. Like it's not. It only matters if you're going to put yourself at risk. And listen, I've dived with large sharks. I've not done baited shark diving. I don't agree with it, but I think that is a very complicated, nuanced topic, and I've had really interesting conversations with people on all sides. And so it's I think there is a time and a place for it if done ethically. My biggest issue with it is that it's exploited and not done ethically more than it is done ethically. But I think when it is done well, and as I said, there are studies that have shown minimal impacts in certain parts of the world on certain species of shark. But I have been in the water with lots of species of sharks, some like lots of reef sharks and stuff. We would see them all the time in the Maldives. But I have been on dives where I've seen bull sharks and tiger sharks, which are both sharks that have been involved in fatal shark bites with humans, so are considered some of the more dangerous ones. And they just swam past. It was very exciting, but it was great. But it was an area where a lot of fishing boats come in and out, and so just a lot of sharks are attracted to the area. So I guess some would argue it was baited, but it's not baited by the dive industry.
Not intentional, no.
But you see these sharks. But so people do. Divers like to see sharks, and I am one of them. A lot of people go on specific baited dives to see these sharks, and so it is important, I guess, for them to be able to recognize these changes in behavior. But the majority, like these sharks, weren't interested in us at all. We were nowhere near them, and I think the problem with baited diving and a lot of work, coming back to the social media point, this rise of people feeling like they need to be really close to sharks and get these incredible shots, puts people at a huge amount of risk. And when you think about how many people are bitten versus how many people are in the water, it's such a tiny proportion. It is a risk, and that it is therefore, I guess, beneficial to understand changes in behaviour, but also you could just not take that risk and leave the sharks alone. And I think the social media question, people see like professional wildlife photographers and videographers posting, and I think social media has definitely taken globalization and like times it by 1,000. It's brought us so much more connected. The fact that I could send a message to like any celebrity I want. They might not see it, but they might. I could just do that. I could just do that right now. That is so weird.
Yeah,
that is such a weird.
Bizarre, isn't
when
it?
you think about it, that is so strange. And we can just see what they're posting. Like they're writing stuff, and like for us to just see. And we're so much more connected to people. So it means though that a lot of these professional photographers are posting their stuff on social media, whereas back in the day they would never have posted stuff like that just for free. They would have sold everything in books and stuff. But then people see it and they're like, oh, I want to take a photo like that. Not appreciating that these people have spent lots and lots of money or have had lots of, extremely fortunate partnerships or whatever, but the kit they're using is expensive. They have trained, they have worked and like honed their craft for years to get good like that. You're not going to be able to do it just as a normal person, like with a GoPro. And yes, there are really affordable, amazing cameras out there that people can take really cool content on. But I mean, it was demonstrated to me really clearly. I loved my GoPro. I used to dive with my GoPro all the time, and I would be really happy with some of the shots I would get. I think GoPros are amazing. I went on a manta dive in the Maldives with 2 professional photographers from the Ningaloo, Ollie Clark and Brooke Pike. Amazing people, both great examples of photographers who use their platform really well and are extremely talented people. They were there with their full setup. They had their cameras, their strobes, their photography and videos from that dive was incredible. And if you do a side by side, we look like we're on completely different dives in completely different conditions. It looks like they had the most perfect visibility, and all the animals were just doing exactly what you want. But no, that's their skill. They had lit their images perfectly. They
Yeah.
were using incredible equipment that they were experts at using, like so much skill, so much talent, and they were like framing the images really well. And they had zooms on their cameras, so they looked like they were closer to the stuff than they were. Whereas obviously on a GoPro you can do a little bit, but there's not anywhere near to that degree. And I think people see their content, not them specifically, but they see these professional, Nat Geo level photographers posting stuff and think, oh, I want to do that. And it's like, well, no, you actually just can't. And I don't know why you think, I think social media has made people then think, well, I want to be as close. I want those perfect conditions. And they don't realize that those conditions weren't perfect. It's just a lot of skill and they weren't that close to the animal. They're zoomed in and they've also worked really hard and trained for years to be able to get that kind of content. You can't just go on holiday.
Yeah, we've lost that patience. That's the other thing. Like social media is that I want that quick, and I want the image, or I want the video, or the reel, or whatever. And I just want to go. And this is where I think the globe sees people going, well, I'll go to South Africa then, or I'll go to Cape Town or wherever and book a great white shark dive. And that's where I guess unintended consequence, but I think it's quite a obvious one personally, from films or social medias like this, or this kind of content, is it pushes people to go, like you've said, I want to go do it, and I'm not really interested in the why, I just want the shot. And then you end up going 17 boats somewhere surrounding a manta ray that's with loads of people just so you can get your photo, and you're like, well, that's not what we meant or anyone meant. But there's a big onus on that communication there, like you said, the clarity of what I was using, where I was, and why I'm doing it. That
I was gonna say also just a little bit of common sense, because I get this a lot with we used to get this in the Maldives with guests or tourists coming to the island and saying, oh, the visibility is really bad. And they were going snorkeling and saying like, oh, the visibility is not very good. And I was like, no, the visibility in the Maldives is often extremely bad. But people don't post that because why would they? But I said, I'm here every day. So I'm here 365 days a year. I'm in the water every single one of those days. So I'm taking content every day. Obviously, I post the best videos. So you're going to post videos where the visibility was really good. But when we had days with really good visibility, I'm talking like you can see kind of 30 meters, oh my gosh, we'd be in the water all day. It would be alert, So first person in the water of the day, be like, guys, the vis is really good today. Like, make sure you bring your cameras for whatever activity we're doing, just so we would then batch film a load of content for the company,
absolutely,
or for the resort. And because we were like, right, the visibility is good. So even if we were doing a restoration dive, we just have the GoPro in the rash vest, and then at the end of the dive, just take loads of videos because it was really good. And then people come on holiday for a week and they expect that level of visibility. And like you said, with the sharks, people going cage diving, they want to see a great white, and they want to see a great white in really good conditions. That probably happens twice a year.
Yeah.
I mean, in South Africa, the conditions are awful.
Oh yeah, they're awful.
Yeah. I used to live there. Like it's terrible. To get really good conditions like that, again, a message will go out on all the diving groups and everyone will get in. But like that's really rare. If you're just going on holiday and you're going to go once, sometimes it happens and people get lucky, but the most likely you are going to have really cloudy conditions and the shark might not even turn up. Like in certain parts of the world, you've got a really good chance of seeing animals, but when you've not got any guarantee. I went to India in 2020, last year, 2024. I went to Ranthambore because I wanted to see tigers. And it's one of the best places in the world to see wild tigers, and because the concentration is pretty high. So I was like, right, I'm booking this entire trip. This was when I was living in the Maldives, so it was very close by, because I want to see a tiger. And you book individual safaris. You don't kind of book a package. You have to book each day a different drive. And I booked 6. And everyone I spoke to, when I said I'd booked 6, would laugh and be like, that's so many. Why are you doing so many? And I was like, well, for me, that's not very many, because I used to live in South Africa and normally you'd go on safari for like multiple days.
Yeah.
So this was 3 full days. It was, a morning drive and an afternoon drive for 3 full days. And everyone was like, oh, you only need 2. Or, most people only go for a day. And I was like, well, what if you don't see a tiger? And they were like, oh, we've got a good chance. And I was like, but do you have a 1 in 2 chance? Like, surely not.
But also, you don't want to just see it once, maybe.
Exactly.
You want to have different experiences.
But of course you didn't have a 1 in 2 chance. And we did, and actually, I think we did see tigers on 3 out of the 6 drive, but one of them was so far away.
Yeah.
It was great. It was amazing. He came out, he did a stretch, but he was in a cave, so we could just see like a head poking out of the cave. And then he came out of the cave, did a stretch, and went back in the cave. It was amazing. But I mean, I would have been disappointed if that had been. I would have been
that was the shot.
That's my one chance in life to see a wild tiger. Another time we had a great sighting, but again, the tiger was not fully in view and didn't move the entire time. We were there for ages. And then we had one really amazing one, but it was very short. So I was like, cool. I was so happy about the end. And obviously, any one of those is incredible and such privilege. But I was a bit like, well, I'd like to maximize my chance of success. And that's only 3 days. When you are going somewhere for only 3 days, you can't expect that you're going to get the best sighting in the world.
Totally.
You can't expect to have, and you compare your content to the people who live there and are there every day, only posting their best stuff. And half of those videos were probably all shot on the same day.
So true.
I reckon half the stuff I post in the Maldives was probably all shot on, a few different days. I'd be really interested to compare that. But like, I was there for 3 years. I was in the water every day, and I reckon majority of those days I didn't take a single photo or video because conditions were rubbish. And then people obviously see the best. And I think, again, maybe that's the onus is on the creators to be like, these conditions are particularly amazing, or to share more of what the bad conditions look like. But that's going to do really badly on the algorithm. And if it's partly, it's people's jobs, they're not going to post their bad photos. So I think maybe more transparency is needed, but also just common sense is needed.
Kate, we could talk about this. I could do another 4 hours talking about this.
Yeah, I could do
we can move on. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a pleasure I said to you before we recorded as well, this is one of the first one-on-one interviews we've done on Into the Wild for a while, for a hot minute. So it's been nice to come back to like we used to. No offense to Nadia, the co-host who's not here today. I don't want her to take offense to that. But it's been lovely to chat to you and be on the show. The listeners will know your social media. It's all going to be tagged on the write-up of this episode, as is some of the points that we've spoken about today, any notes or anything like that. But Kate, thank you so much for being on Into the Wild.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Maybe I'll come back after I've worked with the elephants. We can talk about that or something else.
Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. Let's on location, mate. On location.
Yeah, maybe on location. Yeah, there's good Wi-Fi in camp, so we can do it.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you.